In this episode, we're searching for more horsepower and torque and installing a set of BBK long tube headers. What's up, guys? Welcome back for another episode with our Project Camaro, and this time we're looking to unleash some more power out of the 6.2 liter V8 once again. Now, if you guys have been following along, back in episode 5, we installed an MBRP axle back exhaust system, and it sounds great and it's been holding up really great in the car. In this episode, we're looking to tackle another area of the exhaust system, specifically getting rid of these factory exhaust manifolds, and let me show you what we're replacing them with. All right, guys, this is what I've got for you. These are BBK's long tube headers for the 6.2 liter V8 in our Camaro. And if you want to find out all the features and benefits on these specific headers, check out the product review over at our channel. But for now, let's go ahead and start wrenching on this Camaro so we can get these installed. All right, guys, to get this install started, it all starts under the hood. Now, I'm going to start removing a lot of stuff that's got to get out of the way so we can access the factory exhaust manifold bolts on the heads. All this plastic engine cover stuff has got to go. Intake system has to come out. And then even the covers over the valve covers and spark plugs and spark plug wires will also have to come out. So various odds and ends under the engine bay, once again, just to gain access to the factory manifold. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to do. PCV system. Now, believe it or not, you do need to remove the spark plugs on either side of the engine when you take these factory manifolds off, just to give you a little bit more wiggle room. So we're doing that now. This car has low mileage on it, and sometimes what that can cause is fouled plugs because it's constantly just starting and stopping very quickly, never getting a long chance to run. So these plugs actually could use a change. All right, guys, for the meantime, everything is handled under the hood, so we're gonna move under the car. Now I'm gonna disconnect the O2 sensors on either side of the engine, disconnect the cats and unbolt them and remove them from the car, and then disconnect the steering shaft on the driver's side so we have a little bit more room to finally unbolt those stock manifolds and sneak them out. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, luckily, this car is pretty new and spends most of its time inside, so this O2 sensor came out pretty effortlessly, but use a liberal amount of PB Blaster or some type of penetrating oil on yours if it tends to sit outside, because I'm sure it'll be a little frozen up. Something like that, beautiful. Now I'm going to disconnect the exhaust here at the passenger side flange, this clamp on the driver's side, and then completely unbolt the cats and also disconnect the upstream O2 sensor on both sides. Tight on that. You may be asking why I'm so concerned about taking this lower heat shield off. Well, when I do go to remove the manifold, I want to make sure that everything possible is out of the way so I don't snag up on anything. So if I can get this out, I'm taking it out. All right, guys, one of the most important things you need to remove to get the driver's side header out is this steering shaft. There are gonna be two nuts, one at the bottom and one at the top. Unbolt and remove both of them, and then disconnect the shaft from the rack and pinion, and then we're gonna actually take it out of the car completely, because even swinging it out of the way, it still gets in the way a little bit. All right, guys, we pretty much got the driver's side ready to go. Steering shaft has been disconnected and removed. Everything else is disconnected. Now it's really about the time to unbolt the factory header from the head and lower it out of the car. Yeah. Well, there she goes. There's one. This is what we never show. The struggle of trying to get this bolt that's all the way back here, and you can barely get two hands in here. But it's fine. It's all part of it. All right, I know it's ridiculous, but I couldn't get to this before because the O2 sensor, believe it or not, seems to be stripped from the factory. So I'm actually going to take the cat off now that I have access to it, because this header is going to be a little cumbersome trying to get both of these out at the same time. So let's see if I can zip these off. All right, cat out. There she goes. Woo! Guys, then we got the factory exhaust manifolds out of the car. It's now time to mark and cut the factory pipe. I'm using a tape measure as my straight edge, as instructed in the instructions. Put it in this center hole between the two bolts of the trans cross member, and then on the front edge, I'm gonna make my mark of where I wanna cut, which is just about there behind this resonator. I'm gonna do that on both sides. All right, guys, we got all the stock manifolds out. Our stock mid pipe is cut. It's finally time to get these new BBK long tubes installed. I'm gonna climb under the car right now and feed the headers up from the bottom while someone helps me up top thread a few bolts in to hold it in place. All right, one threaded in. Now notice I'm not going to town on these. Getting them threaded in a little bit more. As BBK recommends, we're going to be torquing it down to 30 pound-feet of torque on each bolt. Like I said before, 30 pound-feet of torque for each header bolt. Now the driver's side was a piece of cake to get that new long tube header in. The passenger side, on the other hand, well, there's not a whole lot of room to work. So before we even can attempt to put that new BBK long tube header in here, I have to remove the coil packs on top of the valve cover and the valve cover itself. And we're also going to be installing some heat shielding around the starter wire below to make sure that there's no issues with that new long tube header. Let's go ahead and get started. Now what I'm going to do is unplug and disconnect all of the coil packs. And I'm going to keep these coil packs in order on top of the motor so they go back exactly where they came out of. It's not necessarily required, but I prefer to make sure it goes back exactly how it was. So when you go to pull this valve cover off, you need to lift it above the dowel. So in preparation to install our passenger side header, BBK gives you some heat wrap for the positive wire for the starter below, as well as one of the main body harness looms going along the frame rail. That's just to make sure it stays protected with all the excess heat coming off the header. Now before we can even attempt to install the passenger side header, this coolant reservoir has got to go. So I'm going to unbolt that, remove the two coolant lines going through the firewall for the heater, and we'll get this installed. All right, guys, we should have plenty of room now. Oh, baby. Yeah, she just slides on in. So I'm gonna get the header in a position and then line up my gasket and throw a couple bolts in it. All right, guys, we got both long tube headers installed in the Camaro right now, and I've got the passenger side all buttoned up under the hood. That means the valve cover is back on, our coils, coil covers, plugs and wires, all done on the passenger side. I'm going to repeat the exact same process on the driver's side. Before you know it, we'll be under the car to wrap up this install. All right, guys, if you're doing this job yourself on your own Camaro and you're installing the High Flow cats from BBK, keep in mind that there is a difference between these two. The driver's side cat will be the longer one and the passenger side the shorter one. Just don't get them mixed up, because if you do, you're gonna have to swap them. There she goes. It's a little bit easier. Now, I can lift this up, line it up with the flange, move this a little bit. There we go. That's a nice fit. I'm gonna actually just put the nuts on here just to keep it from falling off, but I'm not gonna crank anything down just yet because I want to have the ability to move this if I need to. And if you notice, we still have to put in our O2s and everything too, so there's still some work to be done. All right, guys, I'm getting the O2 sensors reinstalled. If you notice, I put a little dab of anti-seize on the threads just to make sure they don't seize up. We'll get these tightened up. We're almost done. All right, guys, at this point, all our O2 sensors are in place. Now all we have to do is tighten the flanges from the high flow cats to the long tube headers. And I'm gonna throw a couple band clamps around the high flow cats where it meets the mid pipe, because in this area, I'm gonna bring it over to a buddy of mine that has a welder. He's gonna weld it up for us. But before we know it, we're gonna have this thing back on the ground and you guys get to hear how it sounds. All right, guys, our header installation is complete. Now it's time to hit the road and see how she sounds. That wraps up our video of our BBK long tube header installation. Make sure follow us on Instagram and Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on all of the latest progress on our Project Camaro. And I will see you guys next time.